They're shiny, they're cheap, you can buy them from the comfort of your own home. Oh, and they make your car sound like this. This is everything you need to know about eBay headers. Today's episode is sponsored by the First National Bank of me. I spent my hard-earned cash on eBay headers, and today we're going to see if that was a great or a terrible idea. And yes, I'm putting my car on the dyno at the end of this video to see just how much power the eBay headers actually add, or don't. But first, what are headers? Well, if you take an engine apart, you'll see ports on the engine's head for the intake side and the exhaust side. With this BMW E46 and its M52 TU inline 6-cylinder engine, that means there are 6 intake ports on this side and 6 exhaust ports on that side. So there's an intake manifold that bolts onto one side and allows the engine to suck in air, while there's an exhaust manifold bolted to the other side of the engine and allows it to push out those spent exhaust gases, which then go into, well, the rest of the exhaust. A header is a commonly accepted nickname for aftermarket exhaust manifolds. They usually feature a tubular design and may delete certain emissions components, with the goal being better flow, more sound, and more power. Like most aftermarket parts, you can spend a ton of cash on a quality name brand header, or in the case of this BMW, headers, plural. Or you can do what I've done and buy headers off eBay for $100. These parts, in theory, look really similar to the high-end stuff, but obviously, I'm going to find out if that's money well saved or if I just wasted $100. For the E46 in particular, you'd be mindful about fitment in 2 important ways. First up is your engine. The early E46 cars, the 323, 328, used the M52 TU engine, while the later 325 and 330s used the revised M54 engine. Now, while they are very similar, the exhaust is one area where they aren't, as the M52 TU and M54 cars have a completely different downstream exhaust setup. That means you need to buy headers that match your engine, because otherwise, the headers are not going to line up with the rest of the exhaust. The second thing about fitment is that these eBay headers just don't fit that well in the first place. A quick Google search will show all kinds of horror stories about headers hitting the frame rails, not bolting up to the engine properly, not being able to fit the oxygen sensors in them, or not even bolting up to the rest of the exhaust at all. Speaking of the issues with fitment during the installation process, the installation in general is a pain in the ass. With most every E46 now being about 2 decades old, expect to replace most, if not all, the studs that hold the headers to the head, as they tend to fuse to the nuts that hold the exhaust manifolds on in the first place, and then walk out of the head when you try to remove everything. Don't forget to buy new OEM gaskets as well, because the eBay ones suck and they will leak. Expect to drop another 50 to 100 bucks here, depending on what you manage to break or salvage in the process. With these particular eBay headers, I made sure to buy the correct ones that matched my car's M52 TU engine, at least according to the eBay seller, but I did still have issues. First up, the secondary oxygen sensors just would not fit with the headers installed on the car. It would have been hitting each other and then hitting the right side frame rail. So my check engine light is on. I, like many other people, just plugged up the hole where the secondary O2 sensors go and live with the CEL for now. Secondly, the headers still did not quite match up right to my exhaust, which required me to find an exhaust shop in California that was okay modifying the flanges of my exhaust to match up with my aftermarket headers, which in my case added an extra $120 to the bill. Ouch. Once I got all of that sorted, however, everything else is pretty awesome. The car is freaking loud now, and as someone who loves loud cars, it's very, very satisfying. As previously mentioned, the check engine light is on, with the car showing oxygen sensor fault codes, which is annoying, but otherwise the car drives fine. There's no hiccups or stutters or any sort of weird drivability issues. Oh, and did I mention it's really, really loud? So my $100 eBay headers actually ended up costing me about $300 once it was all said and done. Was it worth it? Well, I promised you dyno runs and dyno results, so it's time to head to the dyno and find out. Frankly, I'm not expecting too much here. I was mainly after decibels rather than horsepower, but with this modification, let's just see how it goes. Alright, I am back from Superior Automotive and I have the dyno results here. This is the same car, the same dyno. The only difference between these two runs is one with the stock exhaust manifolds and one with the eBay headers. So, drum roll please. The eBay headers gained 2.62 horsepower at the wheels and 1.15 pound-feet of torque. So, what happened here? People on the internet claim that eBay headers are the best bang for the buck mod you can do for these cars. What's the deal? Well, I've gone ahead and plotted out the same points on both runs A to B, so we can compare and see just how much power and torque the car is making in increments of 1,000 RPM, from about 3,000 revs to about 6,000 revs, while also noting the points of peak torque and peak horsepower on both graphs. You can see an average gain of about 2 wheel horsepower and 2 pound-feet of torque to the rear tires at almost every point in the graph. Though from 4,000 RPM to 6,000 RPM, the gains do bump up to around 3 to 4 wheel horsepower, which is a tangible improvement. So the eBay headers are adding a tiny fraction of power, and fortunately the torque and power curves are almost identical in both dynos, with the car producing peak torque around 3,600 RPM and peak horsepower around 5,600 RPM in both poles. So the eBay headers definitely aren't at least hurting the power delivery, which is quite good. However, if we look down at the bottom of the graph down here, we're looking at the car's measured air to fuel ratio. Now, this is a topic for an entirely different video, but to simplify, the AFR shows broadly how well the car is running. Too much air relative to the mixture of fuel results in a numerically higher lean mixture, while too much fuel relative to parts of air results in a numerically lower rich mixture. Generally speaking, for a naturally aspirated engine with port fuel injection and nothing too fancy going on, most people would like to see the AFR go from about 14 to 1 down low and get progressively richer as the engine approaches redline. Think 12.5 or 13 to 1 at redline. And on the stock dyno here, that's actually pretty close to what the car is doing out of the box. However, on the run with the eBay headers, we can see a slightly leaner fuel mixture, with the car hanging out around 14 to 1 AFR through the majority of the pole. That's because the aftermarket headers are obviously different internally than the stock exhaust manifolds, they flow differently, and that messes with the car's oxygen sensors, which reports the AFR to the ECU. In this case, it does appear to be leaving a little bit of theoretical power on the table with that leaner mixture. The solution here is a custom ECU flash or tune designed to optimize the car's fueling, ignition timing, and other variables with these new headers in mind that would likely result in a healthy power bump. But that's also a different video for a different day. So, eBay headers, do they work? Yes. Do they add power? Yes, but probably not as much as you're hoping for without a bit more work behind it. And that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. I'm experimenting with different things in these videos, different audio setups. I got the mic on me right now, different lens setups, camera setups, and different topics in general. If you like this video, if you didn't like this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know, is this working for you? Is it not? And how can I make it better? As always, see you guys in the next video. Bye.